So I'm going to talk about my meditation training, what it's like to meditate for 10 to 12 hours a day for months on end. I'm going to have to break this up into a few videos because it would be a very, very long video. And I can't be bothered to make scripts for these things. I just have to talk to the mic and see what comes out as if I'm talking organically to a friend. So this is a big rewind on the timeline for me. I did my meditation teacher training from the fall of 2003 to the spring of 2004. I was graciously allowed to do a work exchange program to pay my fee for, basically being out of the world for 6 months. And so I worked for 18 months, often very hard, as I was deeply appreciative of the offer. And so when I got to the program, I think I was really well cooked and ready. So let's go into what the hell happens when you meditate for 10 to 12 hours a day every day, sometimes 16 hours, depends on how much you sleep. So that's one thing that we're going to get to. And first off, I should qualify that you're probably going to get different results from different types of meditation practices, and some meditation practices might be better for you dispositionally than others, so that's nothing to count for. But supposing that you have a meditation practice that really suits you and really takes you very, very easily into samadhi, that's what we'll talk about. Let's see, what is the first thing that happened? Well, I already had conscious experiences of samadhi. So for those not familiar with a Sanskrit term, samadhi is essentially the word that we might ascribe to the experience of the now. Patanjali has a very fine definition from his Yoga Sutras, which is consciousness with its movement stilled. It is the silence, it is the presence, it is the space where the perceiver melts into the perceived. It is the atrium of all of our nervous system, the quiet, infinite, vast silence. And that silence can coexist with dynamic activity, can coexist with dreams, with the sleeping state, all sorts of things. So I already had an experience of that. And one of the big, interesting milestones is that it started to be there no matter what. Previous to that, it was something that I kind of, if I woke up on the wrong side of the bed or got put there in the day, if something stressful came up, it would be as if I was well kicked out of that space. And I would have to, close my eyes in meditation or do something to kind of clear the disturbance out of the nervous system, something. There was very much a yo-yo effect. Going out of it, sometimes well out of it, doing things that would bring you back, etc., etc. In this training, I could get perturbed. I could, at least in my head, could get bothered, and it would still be there. I could even sort of try to distract myself at a certain point, like, do multiplication tables or try to rile myself up, and it would still be there. It'd still be sitting in the background. That was fascinating. That related to that, I started to notice that, say I'd be sitting at a dinner table. We usually had a big sort of picnic-style dinner table, 17, 18 people at dinner every night. And what I started to notice was that there was no difference between me and the other people. I could still notice someone sitting over here, someone sitting over here. The food goes from point A to point mouth, all that kind of stuff. But functionally, when there'd be conversations, it was often as if they were happening inside me, and I was out in the other people. Now, not all the time. Sometimes, again, frazzled, tension, whatever, certainly would be there, and that would dim that. But that was interesting. Then I also started to notice that it was as if there was some aspect of my consciousness. I can't say that it was spatially behind my body. because that's not exactly the right way of saying it, but those are the words I would have used at the time to describe a sense of some part of my consciousness being forever sort of back, sort of in a place where it was completely unperturbed, and always reminded me of T.S. Eliot's quip of the still point in the turning axle of the world. That got very deep, and in that space, there was such clarity. It's like sitting in a place where you could have an extremely noisy room. You could even have an extremely busy body and nervous system, personally, and it was pristine there. I mean, it's like the noise on the surface, you could hear a pin drop. It was as if I was at the bottom of Lake Geneva, the lake I grew up on, and my friends could have been up on the pier kicking their legs, doing whatever, and I could be sitting down at the bottom watching it all, quiet. So witnessing consciousness, as it's called in the trade, that started to become very, very apparent. And I'd have to say that if that's not a regular fixture of consciousness, of meditation retreats of that kind can certainly expedite it. Next thing is that witness started to expand into dream and sleep, which was wonderful. I'm going to check the time here on this video. Okay, we'll go a little bit longer. We'll see how many of you have, even at this point. That was interesting because since that witness being there in the dreaming state, functionally at a certain point, maybe 3 months in, I think, I'm counting the months here, maybe 3, maybe 4 months in, it was lucid dreams every time. Now, some of those lucid dreams I completely wasted on the kind of activities you would expect a 20-year-old male to waste them on. Others became much more interesting once I got through the sort of let's waste these lucid dreams on sybaritic pleasure phase. Then it was interesting encounters with the archetypes of consciousness. One in particular I remember very well. This was like more of a passive lucid dream. Some of those other ones, especially the time wasters, were active lucid dreams. But this was kind of more of a passive one. And in this passive lucid dream, I ran into a being that I just knew. I don't think they presented themselves, but I knew that they were essentially like my conscience. They were very Jiminy Cricket-like, we'll put it that way. And actually, they did go by Virgil. So that was a tip-off, because, of course, Virgil is the conscience or the psychopomp in Dante's Divine Comedy, leading him around. So, and I'd read that book, so that's why I knew that was my own guide. And so Virgil, took me, he said, we're going to go to the boiler room of your psyche now. And I said, oh, that's great. And it was literally like a wonderful boiler room with all these, wheels and levers and dials and stuff like that. And, he said, okay, so you just, here's what we're going to do. You're going to just turn that one over there. And I would just do that. So, okay. It's like, you're never going to be afraid of this again. I don't even know what I was afraid of, but I was never afraid of it again. And apologies if I've told this story already. And the next was, I had a terrible, at that time, it was a hair trigger thing. I had a terrible gag effect. It was so bad. It was a very psychological thing, so bad that I couldn't wear a mouth guard playing sports without puking. So, yeah. And Virgil said, let's fix that for you. And so I turned a lever. For some reason, that was my cue to wake up. And he said, I'll see you again. I've never gone back into that. I should go back to the boiler room of the psyche sometime. It's a real quick way to heal things. And so then I woke up from that, and I just had to test it out. And I said, so I just started putting my finger in my mouth to see if the gag would come, because it did, even if I knew I was doing it. I know, nothing happened. I was like, whoa. I said, okay, how far? I'll really stick it down. I stuck that thing down my throat as far as I possibly could. And I was running around the darkened nighttime, early morning halls of our little church ashram, just excited as anything. So, that was part of the dreams. More interesting in the dreams was that in some of those lucid dreams, I started to experience myself as essentially one with all life, which is very interesting. Didn't really stick that much. I couldn't say it stuck that much into my waking experience of the teacher training. I was, I think pretty up and down, but that was going on. And then at a certain point, and this was sort of in the final months, a little bit, I started to experience being completely awake during sleep, which I found fascinating, but I also didn't like. And what was that like? How do you know? How could, if you're awake during sleep, aren't you just not asleep? No, I say that's not the case. I would ask that question myself, honestly. But how to describe? There was an awareness that wasn't of the mind, which sounds strange as well. There was an aspect of consciousness that is always aware, no matter what is going on in terms of the mind. And in the sleep state, I was even watching my mind, just like I watched my mind in the waking state from that still point in the turning axle of the world. In the sleeping state, there wasn't that much entertainment as far as the mind, because the mind was just going, it was like a strange, low, droning sound. And that does remind me of Patanjali, who also says that in his Yoga Sutras, that sleep is the thought of nothing. Not true nothing, the thought of nothing. And so I was like, having that experience, I was like, good Lord, Patanjali's right. This is not true transcendence in sleep. It's just kind of one stupid, low-maintenance drone thought. And it's like, okay. And so I basically, for some nights would find myself sitting in that awareness with going on above. And that was very interesting. And I think that we'll end this video because it's pretty long right now. Oh my God, 12 minutes. Needless to say, I'll be back with another installment of sort of things from meditation retreats and teacher trainings. And, what would be the main idea of this? Persistent awareness. Persistent awareness, whether you're running, walking, talking, eating, having sex, doing yoga, dreaming, sleeping, that's a thing, and it's not something that you make happen by force. Some people do that, they have these meditations where like walking, drying, blah, blah, blah. There could be some use to those. So I'm kind of caricaturing them. Maybe that's unfair. I did those beforehand, and I have to say, I don't think that's a great way to culture witnessing. This witness, that came about through this interesting immersive program, this is there already. This is already awake. It's a light that's already on. And getting there through straining and concentration, like, I'm going to be aware that I'm sitting. I don't think that's the best way at all to get there. Better is to relax your nervous system. Down. You relax some more. And you start to get to a point where your consciousness becomes subtle enough that you can kind of sort of merge with the subtler gears of consciousness that are already there. And that's a good analogy, if you want to throw in your back pocket, is to think of our nervous system like a bicycle with many gears. And that mainly we're trained out of, our training only trains us in waking, sleeping, and dreaming gears in our society. We're typically not well trained to access the other gears that are already there. You kind of have to go off script civilizationally. You have to step out and go be a weirdo usually to reorient yourself with those other gears. But that's exactly what happens in that sort of program. Is you have the time and space to go first connect with gear number 4, which is samadhi. And once in gear number 4 opens up into some other gears. There's more there. Gear number 4 has many secrets, open secrets. And so yeah, that's essentially what's going on there is discovering that awareness It's just always hanging right here, right now. All we have to do is just meet it. So, pleasure talking to you today. If you like this video, please do subscribe. More than that, leave a comment. I like to answer comments when I have time, and I think I have time these days. So, see you later.